Hello and welcome to the Open Metaverse Show live on the Defiant. It's a very special one today because we're looking at different ways that creators can share revenue with their followers. If you don't know how big of a deal this is, well, you're about to find out. And joining me for this first 45 minutes, we've got Adrian Stern from Reveal.
Nice to meet you guys.
The legend that is Dave Curry, aka Black Dave, musician, rapper, artist, all-round good guy. And I think, Dave, it's probably worth us starting with you and a little background on who you are and what you've just done and why it's such a big deal.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Dave, Black Dave in the streets and anime obsessed creative. So during NFT NYC back in June, I had performed in an event called the Wave Room, which was a private performance for all of my NFT collectors. I performed for about 25 people, but I have far more than 25 collectors. So we minted an NFT of the full 25-minute set, and I split the revenue with every collector I have, which is 154, and then split it with the people who put it on, which in total made it up to 159 total wallets were split on the sales of this NFT.
And that's amazing. So your story is you've done some very significant NFT drops, but you're also a guy that is kind of like humble, community oriented. And I'm wondering what COVID was like for you. What was the pandemic like for you? Because I think a lot of people found their way into NFTs during that phase.
Yeah, I was the same. I initially, at the beginning of 2020, I'd made a conscious decision to focus on music and focus on music online, as opposed to something that I think a lot of local artists do where they focus on their local community. And I decided to just give that up and just be an artist online. So when the pandemic hit, I was already like on the internet. I had learned about NFTs through Clubhouse. I was I would say I was in the very, very first wave of people learning about NFTs through Clubhouse. I minted my first NFT in December of 2020 through like a 5-day how to make your first NFT class. I always tell people, like, I've been in NFTs before lazy minting. I've been in NFTs before catalog, when Zora was a closed platform. Like I've been in NFTs for, you know, not that I'm like some super OG, but just to compare to a lot of who we see. I've been around for a while. And so during the pandemic, I spent a ton of time onboarding people on Clubhouse. I've probably helped a few thousand people get their first NFT minted. I've given lots of people Ethereum to get started. And yeah, I think just using that time to teach people taught me a lot and showed me a lot of tools and gave me a ton of interesting ideas, which I've been trying to implement throughout my journey.
And it seems to me that music NFTs have somewhat come into the spotlight and then sort of receded because there's this big issue that they face, which is traditional publishing rights and all those rights that are associated with music publishing and song rights, and how you then translate those into the Web3 environment. And I think that's probably something that you were concerned with. But how did you get to the point where you're like, well, I want to give back?
So I think, you know, I've been trying to get away from like a lot of the publishing arguments just by saying, like, look, this is just like if you bought a song on iTunes or if you bought a song on Bandcamp. Like, I'm going to pay everybody involved in making this song that one-time fee. You're going to have the token that represents the song, and that's that. Obviously, I'm not the whole music industry, so I don't get to make those kinds of decisions for everybody else, but that's how I've been viewing it. Something that I think has been a part of the, you know, the rise of music NFTs, followed by I think a little bit or a good handful of criticism in this space, is people are like, well, why do I need these? There are those early, like, you know, Gary Vee pretending to be early about everything clips where he's talking about music NFTs and he's like, well, what if you can invest in an artist's career early and blah, 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 blah. But there are actually no mechanisms that exist for that. And so this is like the type of thing.
We should caveat that, because there are actually mechanisms for doing this. But the bar is so high, none of the people who actually want to invest can. So that's the problem.
And a regular artist like myself also has that problem, right? Where I can't get onto these platforms, even though, like, I think I'm like I'm like an underground artist in Web3, right? And I might be like a well-received underground artist, but there are a lot of platforms that I just can't touch. And just because, you know, my profile isn't large enough. And so finding all the different ways to work with people, and even with this specific drop, it's not that this drop is a large money making drop. This drop is a proof of concept, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think that it's important to really just say, guys, you can split the money that you make with your collectors. If this were $1 million drop, everyone would have made a few $100s, you know, and $1 million drops happen in Web3. So it's just really to show that it's possible. And not only that, but, you know, I decided to use all of my collectors for this. You know, there is an opportunity for me to only use the people who showed up and say, hey guys, thanks for coming. Here's your cut for showing up. I think there are a lot of different opportunities that exist. And I'm really here just to like push the envelope and show people that things are possible. I'm constantly experimenting in what I think music NFTs can deliver to fans.
So that brings us to Adrian. The headline here is Black Dave shares revenue with 154 collectors. I talk a lot with NFT OGs that I know about this specific problem, and everyone just goes, yeah, but it's going to be a security. So how have you gotten around that? And then I guess we should talk about Reveal, about the tools that are available. How did this all come about, and how is it
Sure.
non-security?
Yeah, I mean, you know, without getting into securities law directly, because I'm, you know, I don't think I have the skill set to talk about that in a competent way. But what I will say is that, you know, we've built technology that allows creators to make their own decisions in terms of where they want the revenue to go, right? And I think that's the way we think about it at Reveal, is like, can we build a layer that will create more flexibility and more opportunities for creators to redistribute revenue between collaborators, if that's what they want, or, you know, OG like collectors of their community, if that's what they want, or, you know, or maybe organizations they want to donate to. It doesn't really matter how they choose to use it, as long as they have those capabilities. And that's really what we're trying to offer with Reveal. I think, you know, one could argue that it is a security, and, you know, someone could make a counter argument in the fact that none of the collectors actually ever knew that they were going to get this share of revenue, right? So they didn't buy Black Dave's NFTs with the expectation of having that return, right? And so in that sense, you could see this simply as a give back. And not really, you know, not really a return on investment, and that would potentially covers the securities questions. But you know, this technology could facilitate artists creating securities if that's what they wanted to do as well.
I think the hard bit here is, once you've done it once, you create an expectation, and so it's very hard to do it again without that expectation being there, because you've set a precedent. And so you do have to confront that security question at some point. There are, as it turns out, and as we investigate this further, ways in which there can be a piece of work, for instance, sharing on Twitter on a number of different occasions, that could count as a piece of work that then becomes, there's an expectation on me to do a piece of work, I will be rewarded for that work. And then it's not a security, and that gets you around that. But again, this is brand new territory here. So let's first get into this specific instance. I'm really curious about what happened and how you did it, because I think that's the first most important piece of the puzzle. Like, we can do it, we'll get into the legal bit later on, but the fact is you have done it, and I want to know how.
Yeah. So, you know, at the core of Reveal, we're building what we call this revenue share protocol, which really allows any creator to basically create their own instance of a smart contract that holds the logic for how to redistribute funds that come into it, right? And so you can imagine, you know, developers working together for like a bug bounty project and wanting to share the revenue that they make from that. You can imagine a creator like Black Dave, who has an NFT drop and wants to share the revenue with collaborators and or collectors, and can simply put the address of that revenue share smart contract as the payout address of the NFT collection. And basically what these, we call them revenue paths. What these smart contracts do is they will, as the revenue funnels into it, they will redistribute that revenue based on the logic that's in that smart contract, right? And so that's really how the revenue share protocol works. That's one aspect of what we do at Reveal. We did also work closely with Black Dave around some of the analytics tools that we're building now. And those allow creators to, kind of aggregate across their multiple NFT drops, their entire list of collectors. And so we use that tool to see if we could actually find all of Black Dave's collectors and make sure we had all the right addresses. And that was step one in terms of identifying who had to be in that revenue share smart contract.
And it's not straightforward, is it? Because you have different flavors of NFTs and different configurations of them. So it's not just like, oh, X person has X NFT. They might have a specific flavor of the NFT or a particular type, and that's complicated.
Well, yeah, there are a variety of different layers of complexity to that. The first is that not every platform or marketplace creates or has the same kind of smart contract architecture, right? And so you've got some, NFTs that are kind of like standalones on shared smart contracts. You've got platforms that create one smart contract per artist, but then store all of that artist's NFT in that smart contract. And you've had platforms that create one smart contract per drop, right? And so the first step for us is like being able to filter these different types of smart contract architectures and make sure that we're reading that properly to give the creator the right information in terms of who are the holders. And then, as you mentioned, you've got different types of NFTs. And, then you also have collectors who have bought and then sold their NFTs. And so we need to be able to track all of these transactions to make sure that we're giving a current and up-to-date, if you will, image of a creator's actual community.
Yeah, and you have bots that buy and sell NFTs as well, simply based on just a tiny profit between one thing and another, and you're going to be enriching the bots, which we don't want to do that. So I mean, I'm sure the sophistication will increase as we get into this, but I think for something like Black Dave, it's probably fairly easy to see it's a small number of NFTs, and most of the people who are buying them are fans and love the music. But again, if you scale it up, could get complicated, and you might get entities farming these revenues because they can. That's the bit that I worry about, that the wrong people receive the benefits from these things because they're simply gaming the system. So I'm wondering if you have ways of mitigating that behavior, because if there's a profit to be made, someone's going to exploit it,
Yeah, the short answer is we don't, and I don't know if anyone does right now. I think that is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed for sure.
Well, it feels like it's a problem that gets encountered a lot, particularly during airdrops. So that the Optimism team it was the Hop team were doing an airdrop, and they figured out how to screen the wallets for bots fairly successfully. But man, it's a laborious process, and it's quite manual as well. And it's a problem everywhere. It's like it's the reason Elon didn't buy Twitter. Too many bots. But so on the other hand, though, there's a smart contract, and basically what that's doing is it's administrative, and it funnels out funds that you put into a split. How does that money get sent in the first place? Is that automated, or is a human have to send that transaction in the first place?
So that depends on the marketplace or the platform. But let's take the example of OpenSea, for instance. OpenSea will send secondaries, or royalties for secondaries to a specific payout address, which you can actually change in your OpenSea settings, right? And so if you were to, for instance, put a Reveal revenue path as that payout address for your secondaries, then OpenSea will automatically send all those secondaries to that smart contract. And that smart contract with the logic in it. We'll redistribute, let's say a third to you, Rob, a third to me, and a third to Black Dave. And then, those royalties accumulate in that, and each of us can go and withdraw our share whenever we want to.
Dave, how was this for you, setting all this up?
So I thankfully with this process kind of worked with them, and they did a lot of the setup for me. Because it was so many addresses and because the process was so manual, I was just like, I think the way that it went, the way that the whole process went was someone from the team hit me up and said, "Hey, Dave, do you want to share revenue with anyone?" And I said, I don't know, I guess, sure. And so I just threw all of my collectors in, and I had been using the data tools previously. So I'm beta testing all the data tools. I have sort of different lists of all my collectors. And I also have like a utility NFT that I gifted to all of my collectors far before, well, I guess right before actually NFT NYC. And I did one more drop afterwards. So it was actually quite simple to use that. One of the big issues that I think I run into a lot is that utility NFT is an ERC 1155 token. And the architecture for an ERC 1155 is just different enough to make you have to recode everything. And so that was, I think, the big challenge in front of me was importing that, and then importing. I had done a free drop on sound.xyz the week before NFT NYC and allowing those people to get in as well, but they didn't have the utility token. And so most of my collector base is based on those two things. I had around 130 people who had the utility token, and then the sound.xyz drop was a 50-piece drop. So about half of that drop went to new people and half of that drop went to my previous collectors. And so combining those two, that's how I ended up at 154. But once it sold through, once we started selling the NFT, I think once we got about halfway through, we had sent the revenue from the platform to the smart contract. And I could go on to the reveal revenue path and I could just click the withdraw button, and then it just sends the money directly to my wallet. And so that part of the process, I think, is going to be the one that a lot of people may miss. And I think it's going to be really important just to give people that information as much as possible. Hey, the money is there. You just need to go claim it. And that's the one step that I think a lot of people are probably trying to figure out how to solve for. How can we automatically send it to the final address? But you have to trigger the smart contract in order to trigger the sale. And it's redemption. Kind of one of those things. Yeah, the redemption. Yes. And so I think like it's going to be one of those things too, where like theoretically anyone could trigger it, right? Like I could go in and say, hey, everybody, here's all your money. I could do it myself as the artist. Adrian could go in and do it himself, like, so I think, triggering that transaction can be done by anyone. It's just a matter of making sure that it is done, or else everyone's money is just sitting in the reveal revenue path.
Yeah, exactly. And this is interesting because as we've been exploring, more and more use cases, we're starting to realize that, there are a lot of people who are starting to enter the space who, aren't as familiar as we might be around Web3 and the technology, and kind of have these like Web2 expectations in terms of user experience, right? And so we're realizing that pretty quickly we're going to have to add functionalities to kind of, serve that type of user as well, right? And make sure that those expectations are met, even if you're actually working with Web3 technology. And so we've got a whole roadmap on how to expand on the revenue share protocol to make sure that, typically the release of funds can be automated, and that, eventually these funds can be paid out in fiat and stuff like that. Really broadening. I know, right?
Did you just say fiat?
I said the F word, man.
Yeah, you get kicked from this stream for saying garbage like that. My word. But, that's delightful, though. You get paid in actual real money. Shocking.
Yeah, exactly, right? No, I think it is important, though. Like we serve a lot of music creators, and they collaborate with producers and songwriters who have never been in the Web3 space.
No.
And being able to allow creators to release NFTs but not have to worry about actually onboarding all of their collaborators into creating a wallet and all of that, I think is gonna allow the space to grow much faster, simply by allowing some collaborators to be paid out in the F word.
Well, I mean, it should be a choice. There's the maximalists would say decentralized or nothing. But I think if people live in the real world, right? And I do a lot of thinking about the metaverse, and the metaverse is fantastic, and it's all these things. It's like blah, 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 but I'm like, yes, but people got to eat. You can't eat in the metaverse, you know. It's like the real life stuff that we have is important, and money. Like if I explain to my wife what crypto is, she'll be like, yeah, but how does that pay for bread? I'm like, that's a fair point. Here's how. And then she's like, nah. So do you feel like you have to abstract this stuff away? And Dave, particularly for you, how much do you find yourself having to explain everything the whole time?
I think because I'm constantly like creating new concepts, I have to explain the concepts more than I have to explain how it works. I found really good ways to contextually explain to people what NFTs are. So that part's pretty simple. I think when I'm trying to especially bring my real life friends into this space, explaining to them what an NFT is, what the blockchain is, how we can use the combination of these two things to to create experiences that are hopefully going to make us a lot more money than we would have made being rappers in our city. That's the part that I think can be tough sometimes, but normally it's not too bad, especially if I say, look, we're going to make money. And I think this kind of leans on Adrian's point a little bit. I think finding opportunities to get people to make money before having to go all the way in and really understand what a seed phrase is and really understand how important that is. If they're like, okay, so I just made $100 with this NFT thing, how do I actually do it? You know, and hopefully like those are the types of things that bring people in. But I really, I'm one of those people who thinks it's super important for getting into crypto and getting into Web3 or whatever you want to call it hard, because people have to understand how important the security aspect of it is. And if it's too easy to get on, then they're too likely to use a really, to put their seed phrase somewhere, to use a really easy password to unlock it or whatever. So I'm one of those guys who thinks that it should be a little bit tough to get through. But I think if you can get through it, then the rewards are on the other side.
Well, I mean, I always say to people, you open a bank account, right? You know how to bank on your phone. And then like from the world of music, you learn Ableton, or you learn how to use an MPC. Like it's the same basic thing. There's a skill set, and if you want it enough, you'll learn it. And it's like this feeling that we need to, because it's money, we need to sugarcoat it and give people spoons of baby food. I always struggle with that, because I think actually no, if this stuff matters to you, and it should, do the work, Yep. Because then you have the knowledge, and you will actually know how to fix it next time. But maybe I'm in the minority here, but I honestly feel like if we want to disrupt things, then there has to be some pain involved. So I'm, underneath, I'm just bleeding from the waist down.
Yeah,
as you could tell.
I think initially that's true, right? And actually, I was having an interaction with the music executive earlier today, who...
That's a weird way of putting it. You were having an interaction with him.
Well, we were going back and forth.
What does that mean exactly?
They were arguing on Twitter, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Exactly.
Was that what it was? Nobody speaks to each other anymore. I had an interaction with a man today.
Yeah, it was that type of interaction. And basically that person was still thinking that Web3 was, a way to, in his words, bamboozle musicians, right?
Okay.
My point being that we're super early still, right? And I know everyone says that, but it's true. And so in this phase, I think it is okay for us to have friction and barriers to entry, because it allows us to make sure that we're building something that's more secure, and that the people who enter the space are ready to do the work to understand it properly and do a bit more research, et cetera, right? But eventually, we're gonna have to offer options for people who want to participate in the space, but might not want to go through all of those, all of that friction and all of those barriers to entry, right? And so, when you look at products that are more advanced in their life cycle. I'll use, since we're talking about somewhat about music, I'll use the DAWs as an example, right? You have GarageBand, which is super easy.
Audio workstation. Digital
Yes.
audio workstation. Yes.
You have GarageBand, who's super easy to access, and you can very easily create pretty shitty beats. Or you can go all the way to Pro Tools, and you've got these different tiers of product based on the experience that the initial user might have. And I think eventually we'll just get to the same place with everything related to crypto.
Well,
also,
I don't know. I think basically what we need is auto-tune for crypto. And once we have that, everything's golden.
Yes, that's all. I think
just T-Pain the max out of it. Yeah.
On the other side of that, there's kind of two sides, right? I think there's the side of consumers who are just coming into NFTs, coming into Web3, looking for products, which I call NFTs products all the time, and people always get mad at me for it. But we're not going to argue about that today. But there are going to be people who are coming in as consumers looking for products who don't really need to understand how the thing is made. They just need to know how to get the thing and how to interact with the thing. And then there are going to be people who make them who really need to understand how it's made and how to do everything. But I think both sides need to understand security. I always make jokes about you weren't in crypto before 2017 if you haven't lost a seed phrase yet. And a lot of people I always make jokes about how Bored Ape holders, you're not a real Bored Ape holder until your wallet gets hacked, stuff like that. So I think it's important for us to take those L's, but we won't have mass adoption with too many L's. Go ahead.
There's a line in one of your songs, I think it's Triple Beam, where you're talking about I don't fuck with apes.
Yes. I actually hate Bored Apes for the most part. I think I don't want to get too deep into the racism argument, but the reason I didn't buy one when they minted is because I didn't want to be represented by a picture of a monkey.
Yeah.
I'll also say that I think that a lot of people are they're confusing being cool with having money, right? And not only that, but people who own apes are acting like they know things about NFTs when they were just a lucky person who collected a lucky project. I was there, I was there on Mint Day. I went into the Clubhouse room because Bored Ape Yacht Club happened on Clubhouse, and everyone was making ooh noises, and I was like, oh, this isn't where I want to be, and I left, and I just didn't buy one. And does that make me less qualified of someone in Web3? I think when I got into NFTs, if you owned a CryptoPunk, we thought you knew everything. We would listen to anything you said if your PFP was a CryptoPunk at that time. I think now, a lot more people have bought CryptoPunks. There are rappers now who are CryptoPunks. I think I think in that song I actually make CryptoPunk rapper jokes because I think that even that's a bit of a gimmick, and I'd rather lean on the work itself. But I'm not a fan of Bored Apes. I think people, and this is something I used to say about whale collectors back in the day, is that whales are people who had a lot of money and now they think they're cool and now they think they're smart. Whether it's would I ever hang out with Whale Shark in real life? No. Would I ever hang out with 88 in real life? No. I might hang out with Illustrator, but he's the only one. And I feel like a lot of people are confusing I have and I made money with I know what's going on when people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars off of pictures of dicks attached to butts. So
it's extraordinary,
really
right?
Sense?
I know. And you think about the cultural legacy of all of this, but you can't deny it. It's like the French getting annoyed that the French language is becoming anglicized.
Yes.
This is the cultural moment that we're living in. I had Ryder Rips on the show a month back talking about this, specifically about internet culture, and it's just weird. It's just weird. It's a weird space, and yet there's enough room in it for an artist that has something to say, to be heard, and to find a voice and find an audience. But what I think is really interesting is, alongside this, it has never been a better time to be a YouTube creator. So you have Web2, massive audiences blowing up, who are doing really well. AdSense is doing great. The pandemic was great for YouTube creators. I think there might be a recession. It might dampen things down, but it has never been a better time to be a creator. You're seeing this explosion of direct-to-consumer mechanics, bypassing brands. Creators now have the power. And we were talking before the stream about how everybody's a creator now. Everybody on Instagram is a brand. And I wonder how you see that, and how you see the growth of this space and the tools that you're creating, and how they can help people of, maintain a living and actually earn from the things they're passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I think it's Adobe came out with this report just like a couple of days ago on the creator economy, and they say that there are now over 300 million creators in the creator economy, which went up like almost 50% in the last 2 years, I think it is. So definitely massive growth in terms of the number of people creating content. Another interesting point in that research is that creators are now usually using up to like 3, or on average 3 different types of mediums, right? So they're not they're not just doing music, but they're maybe also doing like photography or like short form video or whatever it is.
Wow.
And so
that's the multi-hyphenate thing. Like, Dave, you are a multi-hyphenate.
Yes, absolutely.
But I guess
that's it. That's my whole thing, is like but now I think a lot of artists in this, I was on a podcast recently talking about like the slash generation, and how so many younger creatives, and not that I'm super young, I'm 35, but like that so many younger creatives, I think especially in my generation, are actually all multi-hyphenate, because we all came up having to do all these different things. So I produce my music, I record my music, I mix and master it, I take all my pictures, I do all my covers, then I create content around it. I might shoot a video myself, and then edit that video myself as my music video. And so I think a lot of us are running into that. And also like the creator economy, I think, is so interesting in that while it is amazing for like massive collaborations, a lot of times it's really one creator collaborating with a much bigger brand, and that's how we make money, as opposed to 3 or 4 creators getting together and finding a way to make a lot more money together. And so I think, Web3 is sort of starting to offer that. Of course, like I think NFTs won't always be as expensive as they are right now. And when that time comes where things are much cheaper, and I always say, like, if people are buying, I'm selling. But I think that as we move a little bit more towards the like mass adoption phase, things will start to get cheaper. We'll get back to that $5 song, that $10 song, as opposed to that $150 song. And when we do, how is that going to look for this era of content creators? I think social media did it one way, and I think Web3 is doing it another way, where not only are we content creators, but we get to own a lot more of the content between us and the final consumer. And we get to monetize a lot of that content between us and the final consumer. But we're only able to monetize in Web3 if people are directly buying. In Web2 or social media, or however you want to call it, we get to monetize just from people's attention, because their attention then translates to ads that happen on the platform. And while that is, something that we complain a lot about in Web3, it's also a massive way that we make our money in Web2. So how much can we actually complain?
Yeah. And I want to bounce back on your point around collaboration, because that is definitely something that we're seeing. Collaboration in the creative space has been on the rise for a long time. And you can see it in, in music, where like, songs like Beyonce's song that has like 24 different songwriters, right? And you can see it in like, YouTube creators who collaborate with each other. And you see it in the NFT space, where now collaboration is no longer even just between like creatives, but between, a creator and a dev and a marketer around a specific, NFT project, right? And so collaboration is branching out in a way. And that's part of the reason why we think, a revenue share protocol is so necessary in this space, because when you are talking about a decentralized ecosystem, collaboration leads to shared property, right? And in the example of Black Dave's drop, where he's sharing revenue with his collectors, you could even say that like shared interest becomes shared equity. And so that's really the power of Web3. And so we're seeing more and more of this type of collaboration, which leads to shared revenue, and that needs to be automated in a trustless way for it all to be able to work.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The thing you were saying, Dave, about slashies, as we call them, It's like from Zoolander, you know, the slashies.
Mhm.
It's about apprenticeships. So in traditional blue collar work, you know, you go and do an apprenticeship at a garage and you learn how to be a mechanic. In creative arts, that was always really restrictive. It was really tough to get in a studio or get on a film set. Now you can learn everything on YouTube, which means you can learn every single craft that you might decide that you want to learn digitally and remotely, which means we can serve multiple apprenticeships simultaneously to a very high level. The downside of that, everybody's shit sounds the same, looks the same, smells the same. It is the same as everybody else's because you have this homogeny of everything, which is why when I see something genuinely weird, like Defiant word, for instance, you're just like, oh my gosh, please more of this. Like, where are the genuine weirdos? Because everyone's so desperate to fit in that they homogenize and they apply the filter and they apply too much auto tune and you know, et cetera, et cetera. But where I'm going with this is what you're talking about, this collaboration thing. It feeds into like the most radical idea that's been put out this year, which is the idea of the network state, which Balaji has written about, which is this idea that you can coalesce groups of people around a guiding idea remotely somewhere in the world, and they could, in theory, become a nation state in their own right. But it wouldn't be a nation state, it'd be a network state. And so you're starting to think about artists, cultural, you know, members of society who create culture, and then the ability for that culture to coalesce a nation around it that could then be represented at the United Nations, as we start to see like borders erode and like where you are geographically become less important than what you like and the kind of music you listen to. This stuff is wild, but it's Web3 that makes it possible. It's crypto that makes it possible. And you're like, I think I see it. I think this might be possible. Like, you know, imagine the United States of Beyonce. That could happen.
It's true.
Wouldn't that be wild? And then you'd be a
That
member
would,
of,
oh God.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's, but it's when you start to think about this and you think about the power of the audiences that these people have, like, why is what they do less valuable than, you know, like there's tons of states in the United Nations that have a population less than 1 million. Beyonce has way more fans than that. So what is the power of that? And what good can you do with it? And how can you maybe enforce your viewpoint on the world in a way that has some meaning? Really powerful stuff. But none of it works unless you have an economy. Crypto makes that possible. Therefore, you know, here we go. And again, the revenue share bit of this means that these people can earn a living as a fan, which is the idea for me that is the most compelling of all, to be a full-time fan of somebody. That is wild. So I'm curious now where this goes next. What's on the roadmap? What's on the horizon? Can you give us a glimpse?
Well, on our end or on Black Dave's side?
On both sides. Yeah.
Yeah. On our end, it's, you know, we're still early in the development of this infrastructure, and I think, you know, what needs to be proven is that this can really scale, right? And that and that's where we're focusing right now. And so we're making sure that this protocol is as easily accessible to both creators and marketplaces and platforms who want to leverage it. That's step one. I think, you know, the way we think about it, and this is what I sort of alluded to before, is this is a building block, and we want it to be a part of a creator's stack, if you will. But it's really up to creators to define what they're going to do with it. We just want to make sure that whatever they choose to do with it can easily be achieved. Whether it's sharing a portion of revenue with you know, holders of a specific token, or being able to, you know, weight a fan's contribution maybe and pay them out in that way, or just pay out their collaborators, right? All that needs to be possible if they choose to do it. But again, this is really a building block for collaboration in this Web3 ecosystem.
Great. Dave, what about you? Where do you go next with this?
You know, the network state concept, this is the first time I'm hearing it. Super interesting. I chased a similar idea at the beginning of the year. I had released a song that I had sold for 3 Ethereum as a fractional NFT. 42 people bought into it. And from there, I allowed those people governance of the future of the song. So when I had sold that song for 3 Ethereum, I went to my collectors and said, okay, of this 3 Ethereum, how much money am I taking for myself? And the remaining Ethereum is the budget for the song. And I sort of was playing with this idea of, if I have collectors who are involved in the process of the success of this work, then they will be able to benefit from it when we sell the NFT on the secondary market. My goal is just to continue to play with that and continue to try to find ways that people can be involved in the process and really be able to say and prove that they were a part of my come up. You know, my success is inevitable. It's just, do you want to join the ride? And I think with that as well, like with that NFT I was talking about that I fractionalized, there were people in the music industry who were collectors. There were people who write for publications as collectors. And there's this possibility that they might say, well, I'm going to use the things and people that I know. I'm going to use the power that I have to push this thing that I'm invested in forward. And I think what's going to happen is a lot of collectors are really going to start to try to push the thing that they have collected in order to increase the value of it, depending on whatever their skill set may be. Even someone, you know, and not that you're one of my collectors, but if you were like, hey, I'm one of Dave's collectors, I want to have him on the podcast so more people know about him so that he becomes more valuable. That sort of thing is going to happen a lot. And then I think second to that, I'm really focused on moving in the direction of what's in our wallet becoming a part of our identity. I think right now, a lot of people are using what's in their wallet as a way to make a bunch of money or prove how much money they have. But I really want people to start saying, what's in my wallet determines like my favorite clothing brands. What's in my wallet determines what kind of music I like. What's in my wallet determines like what kind of car I might drive or things that I'm interested in at all. And so I'm trying to create things that show your personality more than they may show how much money you made from something.
Yeah, it's wild where this is going, but please don't judge me by my wallet. There's a lot of hot garbage in there. Oh my goodness. Well, listen,
I'm a nice guy who bought a lot of things just to make people feel better, so I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's good to give back sometimes. So listen, Dave, Adrian, thanks so much for joining the show. We have David Bianchi coming up. But if you haven't checked out Black Dave, you can check him out on his website. We've left that in the link in the show. Reveal also, I think there's a lot of interesting things we can do with that platform, and I'm curious to try it out for myself. But thanks very much, guys, for joining the show, and hope to speak to you again very, very soon. Cheers.
Rob, thanks so much.
Thanks.
You.
Bye. So coming up, we have Mr. David Bianchi. He is an actor. He's a producer. He's a screenwriter. You've probably seen him in the likes of Westworld, Animal Kingdom, SWAT, Southland, SEAL Team, Pretty Little Lies. Then the list goes on and on. But he's here today to talk specifically about his collaboration with Gala Films. It's Razer. It's an 8-part sci-fi episodic series. It's going to be exciting. Here he is. David, welcome.
Hey, good morning, GM. I guess you're in the UK, man. How are you? I was just listening.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm in the Netherlands. I'm in the Netherlands, but you know, we're
nice
slightly far ahead, but you know, good. Yeah, thanks for joining, sir.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to having a good conversation.
So listen, what you probably don't know about me is I'm not an actor, but I am a filmmaker, and I've spent the majority of my life making films. So I've come from a similar kind of background to yourself. Made a feature film that nobody saw, that got hacked and downloaded, pirated immediately. And so I've been through that whole process. But I'm very curious to hear how you have ended up here, because from what I'm looking at in your career and everything you've done, you don't need this hassle, man. You don't need it, but somehow you're here.
You know, it's a really interesting question. Look, the short version is, and also it's great to be talking to a fellow filmmaker, first off. So congratulations. And as far as like pirating is concerned, I mean, you know, you can't fight the times. And as far as I've had my feature films that I've produced have been pirated, and to a certain degree, I welcome that, because now there's people in Indonesia that are watching my film that otherwise never would, right? You know, to your question, is that like I started buying Bitcoin in 2017, like so many other people. And so I was already really aware of the blockchain and really inspired by the underlying technology. And so come the pandemic, you know, everybody was sort of like looking left, right, up and down, which way we were going to go. And, you know, Hollywood was drying up. And I was lucky enough to shoot a big show for Tyler Perry, and after that ended, I started looking around, and so to take it a little bit further back, I started producing my own films back in about 2003, 2004, short films and so on and so forth, and making terrible films. Like, Robert Rodriguez says, you got 10 bad movies in your system before you start getting to your career. So hurry up and start making bad fucking movies, So that was basically the story of it. And being a performer and a poet has been a big part of my history. And so I started producing these experimental short films that were told in spoken word poetry that had socially conscious themes. And the first one
it's got its own name. It's called Spinema.
Right. So now
Spoken
flash
cinema.
forward to, So now flash forward to now, I've trademarked the phrase Spinema, and I'm the only person in the world that's producing these high concept spoken word films that are socially conscious, that are like theatrical grade. And so that happened over the course of literally 15 years of just sharpening my blades and becoming a good independent filmmaker and so on and so forth. So that's the segue to pandemic 2020, or I should say March 2021. When I was looking around, I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I started poking around NFTs because I heard about this thing called the $69 million sale at Christie's, and I was like blown away. I was like, that's a lot of money.
Beeple. That's right.
Yeah, and I had been following Beeple Crap, who he was formerly known as, for a very long time, and so I was like, let me check into this thing. But I found that there was no way that I could really enter the space that made sense to who I was, because I found that NFTs were like 25 megabytes, 30 megabytes, 50 megabytes at max. And I was like, what am I going to do with that? How am I going to enter the space in a way that's going to speak to my brand and who I am as an artist and what I stand for as a human being? So I found a platform that allowed me to mint an ERC 721 for 250 megabytes. I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I was able to take a Spinema film, a piece called I Can't Breathe, which was my soliloquy to the murder of George Floyd in the largest civil rights movement. And I was able to compress it down all to a lossless format to under 248 megabytes. And I minted that as a 1 of 1. And so I minted the first ever spoken word film, Spinema film, as an NFT. And ironically, it ended up getting acquired by Metacoven, who is the same gentleman who bought the $69 million Beeple. And so it ended up coming full circle. But to really land the plane, it's not about the money, because like my bills are paid and my needs are met, right? I'm inspired by the blockchain. But then when I started to understand what NFTs are, what they mean, what they stand for, not just for intellectual property, but for a global provenance, but also for, creator economies worldwide. And you being an artist, you understand what that means. That really bent the envelope for him. But the most important thing was that I Can't Breathe, that piece, was celebrated by a community of people who are young, influential, technically savvy, financially well-to-do, and hungry for high art. And they consume my work in a way that has never been consumed before. And I was in a clubhouse room with Farouk and all these really influential folks, 4,000 people, not a dry eye in the room when I was performing this live on Clubhouse. And when that happened, that's when I knew I was home. Because the thing is, we have to understand that when I'm an actor and I'm on sets, I learn their lines and I hit their marks and I stay out of the way. But what I do with Spinema and the art that I've been able to create on the blockchain, that's my heart pumping. That's my purpose. And that's very, very different than being a part of someone else's purpose. That's the stuff that gets you out of bed on Monday. That's the stuff that is the foundation and the building blocks of your legacy. You can only leave here what you have become, right? And what you leave here is a side effect of who you have become. So even if you look at some of the greatest actors of our time, they'll do co-stars, guest stars, and they'll be series regulars. But eventually, what do? They produce their own films because they need to create from their heart as opposed to leading with somebody else's heart. And that's why I'm still here.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing the evolution of the creator economy. And I sort of pull back slightly from calling it that, because it feels like to me like it lacks nuance, because there are creators and then there are entrepreneur creators. But it'll do for now. They are realizing their power, and they're now able to leverage that power in some really weird and spectacular ways, because they, at the very top end, they have grown much, much bigger than the networks and these other platforms that they were never supposed to be in competition with. And now suddenly they are, and they can reach audiences in a very different way, in a more direct way. But at every turn, what I'm hearing now is that they're turning down offers from brands, from networks, because they just don't like the terms. Like, nah, I'm not going to do that. because you're going to ask me to do this and this and this, and you want me to do it like this. No, I don't need you. And that is weird to see. That this, I've been sort of waiting for the rebirth of independent cinema, and expecting it to come, because the tools to make films are so much cheaper now, and distribution is so much cheaper. But actually, it's all the energy and talent that would have been going to independent cinema is now going to YouTube. And so what you're seeing now is the incredible talent and storytelling playing out on YouTube instead of, in some strange film festival in Utah. It's like, it's really sad. But it doesn't matter, because what's important here is that someone is expressing how they feel, as you said, and finding an audience for the expression of that, and then able to continue doing it because they're not being squeezed out and killed by, crazy distributors and agents and managers and all this other stuff.
To your point earlier, and you nailed something really interesting, is that, like, as independent filmmakers, we always say, well, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to raise my money and I'm going to tell my stories. But at the end of the day, you still have to ask for permission, whether it's a film festival in Utah or whether it's some janky distributor that's going to put your film on Vudu. Like, wherever your film, you still need permission. Now, you can make it your own way and you can feel good about that, but at the end of the day, you need distribution. Okay, so now let's look at Web3. So now if we talk about, like, Web2 platforms like YouTube and like Vimeo and so on and so forth, and then we look at Web3, let's look at OpenSea. Don't get it twisted. OpenSea is distribution. If I go on OpenSea and I click and I watch a video, whether I buy it or not, it's distribution. The only distinction is that particular ERC 721 is owned by an individual somewhere in the world, right? And so when we talk about the creator economy, it is a slightly different modified version of a creator economy, because primary sales are going directly to the source, right? As opposed to them sort of being filtered through some sort of algorithmic situation. And then, based on how much volume you actually do in terms of views, you're going to get a little piece of the cookie. So the creator economy is a lot more robust than it's ever been. Secondary sales. This is the most important thing. We talk about this all the time, right? I'm not telling anybody any new news, right? Being able to earn secondary sales on art, to me, is one of the most important revolutions in art since painting on cave walls. Even the masters saw.
But it's under threat, though. It is under threat, and that in the same way that we had Pirate Bay and we have F movies and we have Yiffy and all these kind of things, there are always going to be ways to get around it, because and they exist already. Like we've talked about it on this channel, pseudo swap gets you around it. There are ways.
Yeah,
but
there are ways.
And so we can't assume that this sort of utopian situation. And I include your 4,000 person Clubhouse moment in that as well, because that was a moment in time. It was a brief exhalation of breath, but then it's gone. But not everybody left, and that was the really heartening thing. There's been this sort of crystallization of people who really cared about this stuff enough to keep going. But I guess my point is, we're not there yet. We can't just sort of sit and say this is great. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was your series Razer, why you're doing it with Gala, and what it offers to people who not only love the content, but like watch it and watch to earn. There are some really interesting ideas here.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ideas there. And so another reason, I'll get to your question, one of the other undercurrents why I ended up in NFTs is because I had this project around spoken word films. That's an episodic format that's designed to be on broadcast television, and it's represented by a big agency. It got pitched around town. Unanimously, studio said, David, we love it. We just don't really know what to do with it. It's very niche. Okay, cool. So look, please tell me no. That just means I'm not going to go straight, but I'm going to go left or right. I'm not going to stop hustling, right? So if Hollywood didn't tell me no, I wouldn't have been looking at NFTs or this crypto art movement as a viable outcome for my artistic voice, right? So as a result of Hollywood saying no, I showed up at blockchain. Now, there's that. So now when we get to where we are in terms of independent film, artists are just able to just step into their destiny a little bit deeper. So that is what basically has led me to Gala. So my partnership with Gala has really been just off the back of an incredible amount of hustle in the NFT space and the voice in the community and the sort of reputation that I built as a Web3 filmmaker. So Gala is launching Gala Film. Now, Gala, as many people know, is one of the largest gaming ecosystems on the blockchain. So starting with Gala, Gala Games, and then they launched Gala Music, where they had partnerships with the likes of E40, Snoop Dogg, Too Short, Death Row, and so on and so forth. And now Gala Film. And each one of these areas of Gala has their own nodes. So you can have a Gala Music node. You can now buy Gala Film nodes, and I would recommend that. You're showing that right now. And these nodes are basically going to be authenticating transactions that happen within the Gala ecosystem. And then you are rewarded when those nodes authenticate those transactions, currently in what's called popcorn. And then that popcorn can be converted into a rewards currency. And so that's basically sort of an important part of the immediate watch to earn sort of technology, as it were.
So let's break before we go further. Let's break that down. So the watch to earn component is you can run a node, but you can also buy an NFT of a film, and then when the film gets watched, there are some rewards that get handed out to those who run the nodes, and of course those who own the NFT themselves. But you don't have to own an NFT to watch the film. That's the point, isn't it? There's no restrictions, no token-gated access to the content itself, but the infrastructure side of it and the loyalty, I guess, to the artist generates rewards. But the thing is, we have to be very careful here is when we say rewards, it's still a shitcoin. So it's a shitcoin and based on an NFT, but there has to be value created on that platform by who's creating content for that platform, it's the number one problem for any new content provider. And that's kind of where you come in.
Right. And so you're right. So everything that you just described is pretty accurate, and I guess in a very sort of pessimistic way, but I appreciate you.
No, but our audience is sophisticated. They you've got to call out a shitcoin. It's a shitcoin. Its value is zero until proven otherwise. And that's where we have to start from. And let's not sugarcoat it. Yeah.
No, absolutely. So you don't need to own an NFT to be able to watch the content. So what's important about what you said is that a lot of artists and people have started creating content, sort of, I call it long form, because it's film is film, right? Cinema is cinema. That's not animation. That's not manga. That's not cutesy bunnies jumping up and down for a 30-minute clip. So when we talk about film, for example, we're talking about episodic content. So we are under no illusions that we need this to be massively adopted, right? So just because you own an NFT, that's great that you own the NFT, you own the underlying asset that's attached to the intellectual property, but we want this to be able to be available for as many people to watch as humanly possible. So there's going to be different metrics and mechanisms that haven't really been outlined yet, but there will be a very, very low subscription rate, for example, if you don't own an NFT. Or if you own an NFT, then maybe there'll be an opportunity where you'll be able to forego paying anything, and you'll be able to watch it as a result of owning the NFT. If you own a node, then you have different ways of earning royalties, for example. So there's going to be a lot of different things that are going to be rolling out and coming into play in terms of how the metrics are going to work. We also understand that Web2 is also just as important as Web3. Because creating content in Web3, going to the 300 or 400,000 people that are trading the same Ethereum is only going to take content so far. So we want to be able to create cinema for a community, sell the underlying NFTs to give our community value in those NFTs and value in the intellectual property, and obviously community ownership of the intellectual property, and then let that go distribution wide to Web2, which is only going to boost the underlying value of the asset that the Web3 community owns, for example. So if we look at like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, what makes those guys go moon is the fact that they have been able to culture vulture the entire world to a certain degree. That Web2 velocity has really, really driven what they're doing in Web3. So I think it's a great example of how Film 3, as it were, needs to work with Web2 to be as explosive as we envision it to be. To get to the blockbuster level, we need the velocity of Web2, and we're under no illusions about that.
You bought an ape. There it is.
No. What happened was when Snoop Dogg and Eminem were on the VMAs the other day, I was like, I gotta change my profile picture back to the apes. I bought him for like teeth.
Yeah, representing our man, the journey we've been on. It's crazy, but you're not wrong. Like you guys got this kind of powerhouse in Gaio Siri behind it, where they're kind of brute forcing their way into culture. And from where I sit, it doesn't quite fit. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just feels like it's an uneasy fit at the moment. And I feel like the next generation of IP that comes through, that follows up, will probably feel more genuine. And it's not to say that what Yuga's doing is wrong. And there's so much debate about whether they're Nazis or everything else. That's all part of the soap opera around it. But like, it's. I think it's like you said. I mean, again, I hate the word film 3 because it feels like it's what was film 2. Well, film is film, as you said.
Well, I mean,
so
like if we want to get that granular, we could say nothing is film. I mean, unless you're Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino, who's really shooting on celluloid, for Christ's sake. I mean,
that's a conversation for the day. Like I've actually thought about buying an Arri, an SR2, like the old Super 16 cameras, and shooting YouTube on it. And I'm like, would that be possible to shoot YouTube on Super 16? I'd love to do it. And
I mean, if you live in London or LA or a major market where you could actually process that, then maybe you could get away with it. But
yeah, just get some short ends. No, but it'd be more to make a point about perception and that kind of thing. And like we were talking about independent cinema, and you were, what was it, 2003? You were making movies?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Like the landscape then, there was no YouTube. If you wanted to edit your own film, it was Final Cut Pro 1, maybe 2 if you're lucky. Like Mac OS 10 had only just come out.
And I remember if you didn't know what you're doing, you had to go to like Borders bookstore and buy a book this thick to figure out how to edit, because there was no information online. You couldn't just Google how to text, how to tech trouble Premiere
and
Pro.
A big hard drive was what? It was 20 gigs.
If that.
So did you ever come across the camera, the PD-150?
yeah, that was a tank.
That's history right there. Like I'm shooting this on a Sony FX6 right now. I'm a Sony guy through and through, and like this camera is the camera I dreamed of back when I was shooting on a PD-150. But nobody like nobody's had that apprenticeship of figuring that shit out on the fly. To have it, making movies is so hard. I remember a musician composer friend of mine said, like, who did he work with now? It was like Michael Bay or someone. He said, like, every movie that gets finished is a miracle because it shouldn't actually be possible. And like
movies. Listen, man, you nailed it. But movies are incredibly difficult. One of the things I say to my team is like, look, we're starting today. We're making a movie. Let's hope we're all friends by the time we're done with it. I mean, my latest feature that I just produced, I've had over 400 people work on it. And people just don't realize that the amount of intention and collaboration and also acts of God that have to land into perfect play to get a movie to come together are astronomical. They're unfathomable. So as producers, our job is to take our experience, put our best foot forward. The rest is sort of like trying to predict the future, right? And, we start out making a movie saying, this is what I want it to be. And it ends up becoming what it's supposed to be, And I think that's a cool segue to sort of get back to the Gala thing, right? You asked about Razer. So Razer is a series that is focused specifically on our culture. It's focused on a character named Grimm, and it takes you deep into the world of neural implants, code culture, and the underbelly of black market crime. It's a dark series that focuses on the sort of like 18 to 35-year-old male demographic, which is predominantly what Web3 is. And I wanted to create content that is basically sort of Black Mirror meets Mr. Robot in its tone, that is purely live action, and have this be the first high concept live action series that's ever been released on the blockchain.
Yeah, there's this sense that we have to do like that it has to be cyberpunk animation and this and that. It's like, no, you tell a great story with real actors, real human beings. It's gonna land. But as you rightly said, like you need to know your audience. And it sounds like you've kind of really thought about what that audience is and what they might respond to.
Yeah, I want to be able to create stuff that speaks to who we are. And there's going to be a lot of language and a lot of vernacular in Razer that Web2 people won't understand. And we're going to release a glossary of terms. And, there's going to be all that kind of stuff. So, I just got through rewatching 4 seasons of Mr. Robot. And what's so compelling?
My God.
And what's so compelling about Mr. Robot, and let's just say great independent film, for example, anything out of Paul Thomas Anderson's world, anything that comes out of Sundance, for example, what's the main through line is one thing. Good cinema is people in rooms talking. And the hard part is, how do you make people in rooms talking compelling? Look at Mr. Robot. It's people in rooms talking. There's no Michael Bay visual effects sequences. There's no lens flares tearing across the screen every 30 frames. Like, it's just good human conditioned drama around a world that is chock full of curiosity, danger, and anxiety. Right. And so that's kind of what I want to lean into when we look at Razer, is trying to create those sort of that same alchemy, but do it in a way that's compelling, but that's short form. You know, Quibi did something really interesting culturally. Is they really did something really big in the short form content aspect. So, but what they did wrong was, if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. That's period. And you know that intimately. And so episodic format, even if it's 10 minutes or even if it's 60 seconds, it's a specific 3-act structure. And you have to tell that story, and you have to get the exposition. You got to get the conflict. You got to get the climax, the rising action, the climax, and the resolution. You got to nail that landing in that period. And if you could do that, you can hook an audience at an emotional level. And that's the most important stuff that I'm focused on right now.
Yeah, it's amazing how the ebb and flow of story is embedded within it, and yet screenwriting for me is one of the least understood and hardest to master skills. Like, I could teach most people how to operate a camera to a pretty high standard, I think, in a week. Screenwriting, no chance. No chance. And everyone thinks they can just sit down and write, but my good God, it's hard. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, you talked about Mr. Robot, and one of the fascinating things about that show was the way it treated technology, because for hackers and people who work in IT and worked with computers, they were like, this is the first time this looks genuine. But it also had this weird internal monologue. It had a very unusual lead character, and the way it was shot was just so compelling. Everything was like short-sighted, masses of negative space, and I need to rewatch it because it really left a big impression on me. But you're right, that it shows you that technology, as expressed on screen, can work, but it really demands a very specific vision and a knowledge and a deep respect for the material that you're presenting. Otherwise, you're just going to alienate people, and it'll sound cringy, which is like why most kind of NFT flavored or crypto flavored content falls down, because they're trying to work in all these, this jargon, and it just doesn't land. So I think that's a bit of going to be a challenge for you. Are you writing it yourself?
So I'm the showrunner. I created the series. I'm writing with a team of 2 other writers. So we're in the writer's room right now, basically deconstructing the Bible. So we built the Bible for the first. We're shooting 8 episodes. Arguably, if production schedules stay on board, we'll be in production on or around mid-November through December in Los Angeles. And so we're planning on doing some NFT drops, some sort of like pre-production NFT drops that are sort of going to bring people into the conceptualizations of film. So a lot of the things that people don't understand about film is what goes into development and pre-production. Like, what do animatics look like? What do storyboards look like? What do storyboards look like when we bring them to life? What do conceptual posters look like? Even the idea of being able to sort of mint specific pages of the script with like redactions, so it looks like a CIA document, and there's going to be a lot of phygital components to that. And depending on what tier of NFT that you buy, you'll be able to get different IRL accesses, different digital accesses, access to actors, access to talent, writers. I even want to have AMAs with our visual effects supervisors, because visual effects is a really slept on component of film, which is a high level of art. When we think about digital art, it's frame by fucking frame painting. And we should bring people into the world of what that is. And there's a lot of people that work in Blender, that work in Cinema 4D, that are really interested in visual effects, but never have tangible access to a visual effects artist. And so there's a lot of different utility that I want to be able to bring, not just to the NFTs themselves, but to create an ecosystem of educating people on the filmic process. Like, what does the sheet music look like at the composer level? Can we do what maybe Async has done, where we could take the music and then we can mint specific layers, and people can own different layers, and maybe we can make a different toggled version and a live sort of audience created version of the music that is manipulated by the audience, and then be able to create a different output, for example. I mean, these are all very, very big and lofty ideas, but none of them are impossible with the power of Gala and the incredible creativity of Gala. Your question was earlier was why Gala? because Gala, number one, is not only, I think, is monolithic in the blockchain ecosystem in terms of their approach, what they've been able to do in such a short amount of time. They just raised $5 billion. Their heart is in the right place. They are completely focused on artist forward and endorsing and building creator economies, but also massive disruption on a wide scale. They are completely committed to disrupting distribution as we understand it today. And to me, that's really, 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 really exciting. So I want to be on the forefront of that. Now, is this going to be the next revolution and era of the lineage of cinema? I don't know. But it is really fucking interesting. And it's really exciting to be a part of, right? Just like being on the early edge of YouTube, like that was interesting, right? The people that were on the edge of it were considered curious. Like, you're kind of suspect. What are you doing with this YouTube thing? Okay, well, look what it turned into. I really believe that blockchain, NFTs, community integration, being able to give people access to cinema in a way that has never been done before in Hollywood history. That's the stuff that I'm interested in. I wish that I owned the moment of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or the sequence where Napoleon Dynamite is dancing across the stage. Like, I wish I owned that. I mean,
it's the best moment. Like,
bro, that whole, like,
it's so good. That's a classic. That's a classic. I mean, yeah, obviously, you know, Doc Brown saying, where we're going, we don't need roads. You know,
we don't need no roads.
Yeah, it's I think there is a problem inherent in what you're saying, not the bit that you're saying it, but that a lot of NFT projects that I see pitch the universe before they pitch the protagonist, which I find problematic because it's very exotic and intoxicating world building. But if you don't have a great protagonist and then don't have a great antagonist, there is no story and it won't work. And so when you hear projects or developers, whoever, talking about story, I just go, oh, but what is story for you? Like, do you even understand what story is, or have a way of expressing it for yourself? And it's become like annoying now because it just seems to be a thing it becomes like, oh, the team is anonymous. Oh, we have a story, but like, prove to me that you understand what story actually is. And
yeah, there are very few people in NFTs that are actually building real story, like real foundational lore that have character arcs, and they thought about the characters. They've thought about the beginning, middle, and end of the character's journey. Look, as screenwriters, this is what we do. We break down Bibles, we break down characters, we understand the protagonist and the antagonist journey, and we understand the human condition, right? That's what I'm focused on when it comes to Razer, is the human condition. Because it doesn't matter whether it's Superman or whether it's Harvey Keitel in a Quentin Tarantino film. Like, you are attached to the human component of that protagonist. That's what keeps you going.
You said Superman, and Superman was the worst example you could pick, because he's notoriously difficult to empathize with because he can do everything. He has no human qualities, and so Clark Kent is who you empathize with.
Well, exactly. So just
a lump, that flies around.
Well, of course, Clark Kent is exactly the reason why you enjoy Superman, right?
Yeah, so it's the fish out of water story.
Yeah. So even if you look at, like, going back to Mr. Robot, for example, like the superhero anarchistic hacker, like, it's kind of hard to connect to that guy.
Yeah.
But you connect to the broken individual. You connect to the individual with the broken past. You connect to the drug addict. You connect to the insecure, aloof person whom meanders through the streets completely clueless and insecure about himself. That's what you sort of attach onto, right? And you attach to the person, that individual that moves through those human components to rise above his own shortcomings. These are the things that we connect to, right? The hyperbolic version of the character is not necessarily so much. So I do agree with you with that.
Yeah, so many great characters in that show. And do you watch Succession?
Yeah.
I mean, that for me, that show is the one where literally every single character is just a show in its own right. Like, I just find it incredible. That's it's just beautiful writing. It's so good.
And even when I watch that show, even as an actor, I watch a lot of film and a lot of TV, and very rarely do I look at actors and say, I don't know if I can do that. And you look at the cast of Succession and you hear the syncope and you hear the cadence and the percussion in those monologues, and it is just visceral. It's razor sharp, and you just see them rise to the occasion, and it's effortless. And it's the suspense and the anxiety and the tension and the not knowing that they build in Succession. It's world class, right?
It is world class, and I think anyone who hasn't watched it, that's about as good as television gets for me. Television, scripted drama, it's magnificent.
Yeah, we can go on and on about great series
we can go on and
out
on
there. And look,
Absolutely.
so look, I mean, are we going to be creating the next holy grail of episodic content? I have no idea. Are we going to be creating something damn good? Absolutely, right? So the good thing, like, take yourself as a filmmaker. I don't know how to make bad movies anymore. Like, that's out of my system, right? But there's a certain C level that you've got to reach as a filmmaker from a technical perspective, from a performance perspective, from a narrative perspective. What we try to do once we hit our C level is make exceptional content, right? So we're going to do our best to make exceptional content that people are going to be able to attach to, that people are going to be able to sort of get lost in from a world building perspective, but give it to you in a bite-sized amount. So I'm not asking too much of the audience either. I don't believe anybody in Web3 wants to sit in front of their computer for 30 minutes. They just don't want to do it. They don't have the attention capacity. I don't think we're there yet. So that's why I've chosen this 10-minute episode format, not only as an embryo test, but also from a minting perspective, because I can do about 800 megabytes on the Ethereum blockchain, which argues that I can actually mint an entire episode as a one of one. Right?
It's so funny how this goes back full circle. We were talking about 2002, like trying to compress video for the web. Back then, it was an absolute nightmare.
It's a nightmare.
But now here we are trying to compress it for the blockchain. But 800, you can do a lot. That's like an old DVD.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. So I've already done compression tests. You could take 4K, 10 minutes, and you can compress it under 800 megabytes and have a lossless image. And so for the first time in Hollywood history, people will be able to actually own a piece of motion picture in its entirety. And to me, that's compelling enough to make me want to stick around. That in and of itself alone. Now, there's so many components and pieces to what comes with that. But we're going to be figuring out as we go. And I am incredibly proud of the Gala team. I think that the other collaborators that are involved in this, iIco, for example, which is an animation series, they've already amassed 48 billion views and have broken 4 Guinness World Records for viewership. Another gentleman who's a documentarian, who is an Oscar nominee and multi Emmy winner, is also producing a documentary, executive produced by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So there's also an animated series that's going to be dropping called the Making of the Chronic, or the History of the Chronic, which is around the making of Dr. Dre's album, The Chronic, and an animated series. So Gala is touching on every single piece of long form, right? I happen to be focused on live action because that's my niche. That's what I consider I do well. So I'm looking forward to seeing the entire ecosystem come to life, not just Razer, but seeing the entire thing elevate. And we'll be stomping around Sundance. Arguably, we'll be stomping around South by and some of the bigger festivals, and really letting Web2 know that we're here and that we're a force to be reckoned with. And I'm excited.
Yeah, it's exciting.
I couldn't be more pleased.
Yeah, and what's great is the incentives can be figured out to make it worth people's while to take a look, and that's really the hardest bit, because there's so much noise and so much content being produced. But if you can persuade people to take a look, and then they get rewarded for that time, and they stick around, and the content's good, then it works.
Exactly.
Then
it works.
Something like that. Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, look. Yeah. If you build it, they will come. And Gala has proven unequivocally that they have a very voracious audience, even in a bear market. Like, I think when the nodes dropped, they did over 2 million in node sales in one day. And so there's a voracious hunger within the Gala ecosystem from a community level. So they've got the community, and we're building more community, because there's a lot of people that don't understand NFT film 3, all these crazy monikers we're tossing around. At the end of the day, it's content. And is it good? That's what we have to focus on first. I think the blockchain stuff and all that stuff is secondary.
Even calling it content feels like a disservice. It's entertainment.
It is.
Like,
it is.
We want to have our miserable lives brightened up by something fun, something thought-provoking, something exciting, and that's okay. It's okay to call it that, So, well, listen, David, I know you had a hard out at 4:15. We kept you 4 minutes past that, but Thank you so much for joining us, and I wish you all the best. I'm expecting like what spring next year it's going to be released, or probably sooner if you can get post done faster. But yeah.
Well, yeah, we're gonna push. We're gonna push. I'm hoping for the end of Q1.
End of Q1 sounds about right. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us. I hope to catch up with you again when it releases, and I'm also going to take a closer look at Gala because you never know, I might find myself with an idea
Buy a node.
that I need to put somewhere. Yeah, exactly. All right, thanks so much, and thanks very much for joining us on the stream today. We'll be back next week with who knows who. We haven't got the guests lined up. We never do, but this was the Defiant. I'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Great day.